Imagine discovering your partner's betrayal. Not with rage, not with tears, but with a calculated plan for total destruction. No shouting, no confrontation, just cold, strategic revenge. He made sure they lost everything, but years later an unexpected message arrived. The daughter who once turned her back on him was now begging for help. His response? Ice cold and unforgiving. Victor Hayes had always been a man of precision. As a seasoned engineer, his life was dictated by structure, calculations, and problem-solving. He approached every challenge methodically, never leaving room for impulsive decisions. His career had been built on a foundation of logic, and he prided himself on applying the same approach to his personal life. But on a seemingly ordinary evening, his meticulous world shattered. He returned home earlier than expected, the sound of his shoes echoing through the spacious hallway of his modern house. The scent of lavender candles, usually a comforting presence, now carried an air of unfamiliarity. Something felt off. His instincts, honed over decades of analytical thinking, immediately sensed a disruption in the usual order of things. As he walked toward the bedroom, he noticed a silk scarf carelessly draped over the banister. A scarf he knew did not belong to his wife, Evelyn. A nagging feeling crept into his mind. With steady hands, he pushed open the bedroom door, revealing a scene that would etch itself into his memory forever. Evelyn, the woman he had built a life with, lay entangled with another man. Victor did not speak. He did not yell. Instead, he stood still, his heartbeats slowing as his mind processed the situation like a complex equation. The stranger in his bed was none other than Ryan Foster, the young fitness instructor Evelyn had recently mentioned in passing. Their laughter ceased the moment they noticed Victor's presence, and an awkward, stifling silence followed. Without a word, Victor turned and left the room, his face betraying no emotion. He walked out of the house, got into his car, and drove without a destination in mind. His world, once built on logic and order, now felt like a chaotic puzzle with missing pieces. But he was not a man who succumbed to chaos. He was a man who controlled it. By the time he reached his private office, Victor had already formulated the first steps of his plan. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and picked up his phone. A betrayal of this magnitude required careful handling. His emotions were irrelevant. What mattered now was execution. He dialed the number of a private investigator, someone who had assisted him in corporate cases before. This time, the target was much closer to home. Over the next few weeks, Victor gathered evidence meticulously. The investigator provided detailed reports, hotel receipts, bank statements, text messages, and photographs. He learned that Evelyn's affair with Ryan had been ongoing for months. The pieces of the puzzle slowly aligned, revealing the full extent of the deception. What infuriated him most was the financial aspect. Evelyn had been siphoning money from their joint account to support Ryan's lavish lifestyle. Expensive watches, weekend getaways, personal training certifications, all funded by Victor's hard-earned wealth. It was no longer just a matter of betrayal. It was theft. Instead of confronting Evelyn, Victor continued his research. He consulted a lawyer, ensuring that when the time came, he would have the upper hand. He had no intention of making this easy for her. Divorce was inevitable, but he would dictate the terms. He also began looking into Ryan's background. What he discovered was enlightening. Ryan was drowning in debt, with creditors breathing down his neck. His charm and good looks masked a financial mess, one that Evelyn had unknowingly entangled herself in. This knowledge gave Victor leverage, something he knew he would use when the moment was right. The days turned into weeks, and Victor maintained his composure. He played his role as the oblivious husband while laying the groundwork for his next move. Evelyn remained unaware that every step she took was being documented. Every lie she told meticulously recorded. Victor Hayes had once been a man of logic and structure, and now he was about to apply those principles to the art of calculated revenge. The betrayal was complete, but the reckoning had only just begun. Victor Hayes knew that patience was his greatest weapon. While others might have acted out in rage, he preferred a strategic approach, ensuring that every move was calculated and every consequence anticipated. The betrayal had already been committed. Now, it was his turn to dictate the course of events. His first step was financial. Over the years, Victor had meticulously documented their assets, joint accounts, and investments. What Evelyn didn't realize was that she had no control over the majority of their shared wealth. He quietly shifted funds, ensuring that by the time she even suspected anything, her access would be limited. Evelyn had enjoyed the luxury of his success, but soon, she would understand the true cost of her actions. While Evelyn continued her charade, oblivious to the net closing in around her, Victor dug deeper into Ryan Foster's past. The fitness trainer had always projected confidence, but behind the image was a trail of unpaid debts and broken promises. His business ventures had failed repeatedly, leaving him at the mercy of ruthless lenders. It was clear that Ryan saw Evelyn not just as a lover but as a financial lifeline. With the help of his private investigator, Victor set a series of events in motion. He leaked information about Ryan's debts to key individuals, those who had a vested interest in recovering what was owed. Within days, the pressure on Ryan intensified. Phone calls turned into threats, and his carefully constructed facade began to crack. At the same time, Victor made subtle adjustments to Evelyn's financial life. Small transactions were flagged for review, creating complications in her day-to-day spending. Her credit cards were scrutinized, joint accounts monitored, and access to certain funds revoked. She hadn't noticed yet, but soon she would feel the strain. Victor also started spreading whispers within their social circle. Carefully crafted stories, nothing too direct, just enough to sow doubt. He ensured that their acquaintances began questioning Evelyn's loyalty, that quiet conversations hinted at improprieties. It was a slow burn, but it was effective. The real blow, however, came when Victor uncovered a hidden detail in Evelyn's financial records, evidence that she had been transferring large sums to Ryan. Not only had she betrayed him emotionally, but she had also been funneling his money to support a man drowning in his own failures. This was the leverage he needed. Armed with this knowledge, Victor had his lawyer draft the necessary documents. When the time came, Evelyn wouldn't just lose her marriage. She would lose everything. Her comfortable lifestyle, her reputation, even the illusion of control she had built over the years. Ryan, on the other hand, would soon learn that gambling with another man's resources had consequences. As his financial troubles deepened, Victor made sure that certain individuals in Ryan's life were aware of his recent windfall. Those debts he had been running from, his creditors now knew exactly where to find him. Victor had no intention of a dramatic confrontation. There would be no shouting matches, no emotional outbursts. He preferred silence, the slow, crushing weight of inevitability. He would let them believe they were winning, that they had fooled him. And just when they thought they were safe, he would take everything away. As he watched the pieces fall into place, Victor Hayes felt no remorse. He had not sought out this war, but now that it had come to him, he would ensure that he was the only one left standing. Victor Hayes had always been a man who thrived in control, but his next move required precision beyond anything he had executed before. The groundwork had been laid. His financial maneuvers had begun to limit Evelyn's access to the lifestyle she had taken for granted, and Ryan Foster was feeling the pressure of his accumulating debts. However, Victor was not done yet. As part of his long-term plan, he accepted a job opportunity abroad, relocating to Dubai to spearhead an ambitious engineering project. This served two purposes. It allowed him to distance himself physically from the mess he had left behind while simultaneously positioning himself in an environment where his expertise was valued more than ever. The move was not a retreat, it was a tactical repositioning. The transition was seamless. Victor settled into his new life, working long hours and immersing himself in his projects. His presence in Dubai gave him an added layer of security, ensuring that Evelyn and Ryan would no longer have direct access to him or his resources. Meanwhile, he continued monitoring the consequences of his actions back home. Evelyn's world was beginning to crumble. The first real signs of trouble came when she attempted to make a substantial withdrawal from their shared account, only to find her access restricted. Confusion turned into frustration as she struggled to maintain the level of luxury she had grown accustomed to. Bills were piling up, and the realization that something was very wrong began to sink in. Ryan, on the other hand, was facing a far more immediate threat. The financial burdens he had managed to keep at bay were now crashing down on him. Calls from creditors had turned into direct confrontations. Some of the people he owed money to were not known for their patience. Victor had made sure of that. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, Evelyn found herself entangled in legal issues. The financial records Victor had collected were now in the hands of his attorneys, and they painted a damning picture. Misuse of marital funds, hidden transactions, and reckless spending were all meticulously documented. The case for divorce was airtight, and more importantly, it was on Victor's terms. The news of Victor's departure had reached their shared social circle, and with it came whispers and speculation. Without him there to control the narrative, Evelyn struggled to maintain her facade. Friends who once admired her began to distance themselves, unwilling to associate with the growing scandal. Ryan, who had once been her escape, was now a liability, one that she could no longer afford to support. Victor's final blow was a simple one, yet devastating in its execution. He ensured that Ryan's financial records, along with evidence of his growing debts, were forwarded to the right people. Soon, Ryan found himself in a situation he couldn't escape from. The people he owed money to were not content with waiting any longer, and Evelyn, seeing the danger, finally understood the full extent of what she had lost. Victor never reached out. He never sent messages or letters. His silence was his final statement, and it was louder than any confrontation could have been. Evelyn had made her choices, and now she was left to deal with the fallout alone. Ryan had played his games, and now he was facing the consequences of his reckless lifestyle. In Dubai, Victor Hayes continued forward. He had won not through anger or desperation, but through patience and calculation. His past was behind him, and his future was now entirely his own to shape. Victor Hayes had orchestrated his plan with meticulous precision, ensuring that both Evelyn and Ryan faced the full weight of their actions. As the legal process unfolded, he remained distant yet omnipresent, pulling the strings from afar while his carefully laid foundation did the rest. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Evelyn had expected some form of negotiation, a chance to salvage at least a fraction of the life she had once lived. What she encountered instead was a legal onslaught she had no means to counter. The financial records Victor had compiled spoke louder than any argument she could make. The courts ruled decisively in his favor, leaving her with little more than the remnants of her former status. She lost the house, access to the joint assets, and any claim to the business ventures she had once relied on. Victor had ensured that her financial ruin was not just a possibility but a certainty. Every hidden expense, every fraudulent transaction, every misuse of their shared funds had been documented and presented in the courtroom with irrefutable clarity. The judge had no sympathy for her, nor did Victor. She had betrayed him, not just in love but in trust, and for that, there was no forgiveness. Meanwhile, Ryan was facing his own reckoning. His mounting debts had reached a critical point, and those he owed were no longer willing to wait. The financial leaks Victor had orchestrated had made it impossible for Ryan to secure any assistance. His once charmed life had collapsed into desperation, and Evelyn, now struggling herself, could no longer offer him a lifeline. As Ryan's situation spiraled out of control, he attempted to confront Victor, reaching out in a last-ditch effort to plead for some form of reprieve. His messages went unanswered. There was nothing left to discuss. Ryan had been nothing more than a temporary distraction for Evelyn, a mistake that had cost them both everything. Evelyn, left with no other options, attempted to salvage what little dignity she had left. She sought out former friends, those who had once admired her, but found only closed doors and polite refusals. The world she had known was no longer willing to embrace her. The scandal had tarnished her reputation beyond repair, and without the financial cushion Victor had once provided, she found herself navigating a reality she had never prepared for. Victor, on the other hand, had moved on entirely. His life in Dubai was fulfilling, free from the chaos he had left behind. His career thrived, his influence grew, and for the first time in years he felt a sense of true freedom. The past no longer held power over him. He had dismantled it piece by piece, ensuring that those who had wronged him felt the consequences of their actions without ever having to lift a finger in direct confrontation. As time passed, the echoes of his revenge faded into the distance. Evelyn and Ryan had become cautionary tales, whispers in social circles they once dominated. And Victor? He simply continued forward, never once looking back. Years had passed since Victor Hayes had last thought about Evelyn Carter or Ryan Foster. Their downfall had been swift and thorough, leaving them to navigate the wreckage of their own choices. He had moved on, built a new life in Dubai, and immersed himself in his work, free from the burdens of his past. But then, an unexpected message arrived. It was from Sophia. His daughter's name on the screen stirred something within him, though it was not the warmth one might expect. Their last interaction had been distant, strained by the choices she had made in the wake of his divorce. She had sided with Evelyn, unwilling to see the truth of what had transpired, and Victor had let her go, unwilling to fight for someone who had chosen to stand against him. Now, after all these years, she was reaching out. Curiosity got the better of him, and he opened the message. It was brief, devoid of the pleasantries of a reunion. She needed help. Financial help. Evelyn was struggling, and Sophia, having realized the harsh reality of their situation, had nowhere else to turn. Ryan was long gone, his debts having caught up with him, leaving both of them abandoned and without resources. Victor read the message twice before setting his phone down. He felt no anger, no sense of triumph, only a quiet confirmation that he had been right all along. He had given them chances, opportunities to do right, to take responsibility, to act with integrity. They had squandered them all. And now, when the consequences had become unbearable, they sought out the very man they had cast aside. For a brief moment, he considered responding, considered offering some small token of assistance. But then he thought of the years he had spent rebuilding himself, of the peace he had earned, of the choices he had made to ensure that he would never again be vulnerable to betrayal. Victor Hayes deleted the message. His past was behind him, and he intended to keep it that way.